some hidden levels, and I was getting my butt kicked today. Like, I
Nice.
died. I probably spent an hour on one level, and it wasn't that I couldn't beat it, but you know how it works. You have to collect all the stars. Like, the whole point is
Right.
to collect the stars in the level. So if you beat it without collecting the stars, it's totally pointless.
Right.
So like I had to get all those stars, and man, oh my gosh, I died so many freaking times. It's pretty good though.
uh,
It's pretty good.
Me and Rachel
We
want to get a
bought.
Wii U soon. We're getting a Wii U soon.
Honestly, in hindsight, if I could do it all over again and I was gonna blow money on a console, I mean, I have a PS4 which I will be putting to expand. I mean, I'm gonna be using a lot soon, but like
Right.
if it tells you anything, like I bought Infamous, and that's the only game I've played. Honestly, I haven't touched my PS4 in probably like a month.
Yeah.
Just because there's not. I mean, like I played a lot when I first got it. There's just not a lot out for it. So if I could go
Right.
blow it again, I probably would have bought a Wii U and then bought a couple games for it. Because Wii U's actually got. I mean, it's not like an incredible library, but compared to the PS4 and Xbox One, it's actually got like about 6 or 7 games that'd actually be like, yeah, I'd
Right.
totally play that game. Versus like
So and,
PS4.
and
It's just,
Rachel's more into the Nintendo Wii games.
Yeah.
So when I'm sitting here playing Skyrim, she's like, I don't really want to get into Skyrim, but I could totally get into some Mario games. So
Yeah.
we're talking about getting the Wii U soon.
What's cool too, if you get there's the new Super Mario Brothers on the Wii U that and Austin has both of them, and then there's Super Mario 3D World, which is kind of like the more like hardcore quote unquote version of it.
Yeah.
And both of them have like co-op, so that's kind of cool. You guys could play that together.
Yeah.
We just bought the other day. Bought a Super Nintendo, and I'm so excited.
Sweet.
Oh
I've been
yeah,
playing through all the old games. It's so great.
That's awesome. It was actually kind of funny when we at my wedding I was like messing around in the youth room, and I found an NES, and I was like, what? I was like, it was like 2 hours before my wedding, and we were ready, and we're
I guess I'm skipping your wedding.
I like getting it out. I'm like, oh, we got to play this on my wedding day and all this stuff, and then like they didn't have the power cord. They had everything.
Aw,
They had the
had a whole
inputs, they
box
had
of
the
games.
they had the controllers, they had
That
everything,
sucks.
but not the power cord. I was like, what? I was so upset.
pull a Darth Vader. No. Yeah.
I can't believe they had it, to be honest, though.
I was shocked they had so many games in that box too. It was insane. I was
Yeah, I
like, there's 20 games in there. Holy crap.
I'm currently going through and like marking a bunch of like old games I need to go buy. Among them, NBA Jam. That's
Oh
such
yeah.
a great game.
And the engine, you're on fire.
Yeah, dude, those games are
Oh
those
my
games are awesome.
God, I need that game.
My favorite was, well, again, this is an N64 thing. Retro, like with the sports games. I don't really play a lot of sports games, as Austin knows. But like the one like sports franchise I got so into was NFL Blitz on the N64.
Oh, NFL Blitz was
Oh, yeah.
amazing.
Oh, it was incredible because like the things you could do were stupid. Like you could never do it in a real football game. But it was
Body
just-
slamming people and elbow dropping them.
and then like if you got your special high enough, you could like literally do a touchdown to a field goal pass. Oh,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, it's good times. So yeah, this is our bonus episode of Game of Thrones, guys. We're here, we're talking nerdy stuff because that's what we do. And so, welcome to the Cast Beyond the Wall, where we're taking it's kind of a down week. There was no new episode, but we're just kind of chatting it up. We're chatting about video games and fan theories and all sorts of awesome stuff, guys. And we really hope that some of you can join in the conversation. We're still waiting on the fight between the Mountain and the Viper, which shall be epic. But until then, we're going to go ahead and have just kind of a chill week where we kind of talk some fan theories and have some fun. I just want to remind everyone that we are presented by our partner at We Got This Covered. They're a really great source for all your TV, movie, gaming news. And if you're, if you play video games like an Xbox 360, PS3, PS4, Xbox One, there might be a little game that came out this week called Watch Dogs. Might have heard of it. It's kind of making a big waves. Supposed to sell like 8 million copies or whatever. Well, we got you covered.com. They've got a review up, and it's a pretty dang good review. I went through and read it last night, and I suggest you all check it out. If you're watching this via YouTube, which no one is right now, you should totally submit some questions, and we're gonna, after we get done with our theorizing and talking about our big Game of Thrones opinions and analyses, we're gonna take some questions, hopefully. So if you're listening to the show, go ahead and shoot us a question either via the YouTube or on our Q&A app, which you can click on when you pull up the YouTube video. But until then, I'm your host, Caleb Masters, joined, as always, by the loyal, the faithful, the always there. He's in Oklahoma City. Sir, introduce yourself.
Daniel Stull.
And the man who battles rattlesnakes on a daily basis just bought an SNES and is like going out in the desert and saying "F you, son." Sir.
Austin Lucari.
And we don't have a guest host this week because we're just having fun. So we're just gonna chat it up. To start off this week, to break the ice between us and our kind of chill drinking beer and screwdrivers and vodka podcast, I begged the question with Mr. Dalton Stewart, our guest host from the Good Trash Genre Cast a couple weeks ago, what was his favorite Game of Thrones moment? And then it dawned on me that we hadn't talked about that as our own host, us core central hosts. So I ask you, Daniel Stoll, what is your most memorable Game of Thrones moment?
Well, this is actually a really tough question. There are a lot of different things that come to mind. Some of them are that probably a lot of people share, and some of them maybe not so much. But so I guess I'm gonna cop out here, and I'm gonna say like a couple of them. So
yeah, go for it.
But one that I think a lot of people would probably bring up would, for me, which is it's actually kind of interesting because these moments are not in the book, is actually the scenes between Tyrion and Arya back in season 2. Specifically, one of my favorite moments of all those scenes is the one where Tyrion is talking about. Sorry, not Tyrion. Tywin is talking about. He's talking about what does the North say about Robb Stark, and she gives he rides a wolf into battle and all these things, and he says, what is that true? And they say that he can't die, Robb can't die, and then Tywin says, what do you say, girl? He's like, that's not true. Anyone can die, and she sort of says it with this sort of looking right into Tywin's eyes, saying, you can also die too, and that was like one of the really fun moments for me because Arya is my favorite character, and so that was one of the most memorable moments for me. And then obviously we have moments such as, honestly, Ned's death is a huge memorable moment for me as well, because I was one of the guys that fell into the trap of supporting him hugely, and
I was there.
I remember. Yeah, Caleb was there, and I remember when it happened. I sort of.
No, you were like the rest of us, man. We're all sitting there like, there's no way he's dead. Like Daniel was sitting there. I mean, I wish I could just his face when the sword fell, and he's like, "There's no way that didn't happen." He's like Arya came up and saved his life or something.
It cuts to credits, and I'm like, so, he didn't die. And Caleb's like, "What?" And he's like, "You saw it go through." I was like, "Yeah, but you didn't actually see it." And I was like, I tried to deny it. So those are probably and I guess they are Stark moments, which is interesting because I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a Stark fan at this point in the series because they're not really existent. But I don't know. Those are probably two of the more that stick out to me personally.
I want to piggyback on that one actually, because I think the death of Ned, as we've talked about before, sets the tone for the entire show. It wasn't until the end of the first season that you realize this is way different than anything you've experienced before. And the funny thing about it is the first season has several moments in it that make you feel like, oh, this is a pretty, relatively traditional show. It's a good show, but it follows, the basic rules of storytelling on television. One of the moments being when Khal Drogo pours the gold over Viserys' head. Yeah. Because you see that and you're like, yeah, bad people suck. They're going to get what's coming to them and all this stuff. And you think, at least I did, that, you know what, everything's going to work out just fine. The bad people are going to die. The good people are going to live. You might lose a few along the way, but generally it's going to be okay. And then Ned happens, and you're like, I was totally wrong. Everything I knew was a lie, and you just don't really know where to go from there.
Yeah, it's so funny because that first season, Austin, you're right. It is very much set up initially as like a more traditional show. Ned's the hero. He's flawed, but he's a good guy. He's the guy you're rooting for. He's the one you connect with. He is your, kind of avatar for the show. And I love that you bring up the Khal Drogo point because it's set up. Okay, so naturally, Daenerys and Khal Drogo is going to tie in by the end of the season. I mean, I know they're not there yet, but by the end of the season, that's going to tie in because that's just how TV works. And of course, Khal Drogo is going to rise up and decide to take the throne for this woman that he's fallen in love with, right? And they're going to cross the Red Sea with their epic army, and it's going to cause Ned and Robert a whole bunch of problems. But I think the first mark where we kind of see that, oh, what's going on, is when Robert dies. First off, like, none of us were expecting that. I mean, it wasn't like a big shocker because he wasn't a main character, but I don't think any of us were like, yes, Robert's totally going to die, early on. So it was a little surprising because, again, this is a show we're used to seeing you have your core cast of characters who you just know aren't going to die. And I, at least personally, I felt like Robert was among them. And then you see him die in a really odd sort of way. He gets killed by a boar, and you're like, okay. And then you're also expecting to see this Khal Drogo stuff tie in. But what I love, the show in the last probably 3 episodes, after episode 6, really does subvert your expectations. Because guess what? Khal Drogo, not only does Khal Drogo not do it, he gets killed by infection. That's like something that doesn't happen. I mean, well, killed. Or, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
He gets infected and like diseased and dies. Something like normal shows would just never even think about. You wouldn't even think that being a thing. And he doesn't make it. And then Ned dies, and you're like, what the? And at that point, you're just like, nobody is safe. Period. Like, just across the board. And I think that was kind of a big. I do like how you bring that up. The season 1 though really was very traditionally set up, and it very much subverts our expectations at the end of that to make us feel unsafe and like everyone could be in danger.
Yeah, I do think my favorite kind of moment throughout the show, though, and while it is a big scene, is not the biggest. It was just the way it was edited and the way is executed was really well. Was when Jaime gets his hand cut off last season. In season 3, when it happens, you get the slice and the sword kind of coming down on the stump or the table. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
And then it just cuts out, and I thought, oh, something happened, something went wrong, and you realize, no, that's it. That's just it. And so it lets you sit there and think about, like, what are the consequences of this? And you don't even truly know when you first see it, like, how big of a deal that actually is going to be. And even this season and in the latest episodes, this past episode that aired, you're still seeing the consequences of that action, where Jaime can't fight for Tyrion because he'd get killed. He just can't do it anymore. It's such a small, simple scene has had like such huge implications throughout the series since it's happened. So that's probably my most memorable moment, just from an editing perspective and from how like simple and effective it was.
Yeah, and that was kind of a cool scene. And I've gone back and seen that scene a couple of times. Welcome back, Daniel.
Hey.
It was really great. Austin just totally went on like nothing happened. So good for editing. He didn't notice, but he just like kept going. But yeah, Austin, I agree. Jaime losing his hand was definitely an interesting moment. Now, I had read the books by that point, so I knew it was coming. When I go back and watch this, and the way it's done is really shocking because you see his hand, and then like it's kind of like with Ned's head. You're like, did that just happen? Like then if you watch real closely, you see him actually pull his stump hand up, and you see the hand like they're not connected. And you're like, and then that episode in particular cuts to something very unusual for Game of Thrones. It was like a hardcore rock version of Bear the Maiden Fair, and you're like, what did I just see? It was
so weird. It was so weird. Because I thought, like, okay, truth to the audience, I don't always watch the show in the most legitimate ways. And so I thought I got a bad copy of it because it was, like, weird music and it cut off weird. I didn't know what was going on. I thought, oh, man, I missed part of the show. But no, that was it. That was how it was done. It was so weird.
It was definitely strange and definitely different than what we were used to seeing, at least by that point.
Yeah, I think so. And Game of Thrones is so great at subverting our expectations. Even when we've learned that we can't trust Game of Thrones, there's still like we've been so programmed by like what is traditional TV, traditional television, what we should expect from our shows that like even when we know no one's safe, our expectations are still subverted. And I'm also referencing the Red Wedding to that extent because I mean. We saw it happen to Ned, but your automatic thinking is, okay, so Ned's dead. and Rob's raising an army. Well, naturally, he's going to come and he's going to avenge Ned, and we're finally going to get that justice we wanted for, because that's what that's what a more traditional story would do. And Game of Thrones didn't do that.
Right.
No, it let us, and it set it up so that yes, he was our true hope to see. Even if you didn't like Rob, it was more like what he represented. He represented hope for the North, hope for Ned Stark. That even if we thought Ned was flawed, we all still loved him because he was a guy who clung to moral values, unlike most people on the show. And there's a lot of respect. I think there's a lot of respect for that character in that much, and I really like that about the character. So we wanted to see that. We wanted to see that justice so badly, and Game of Thrones is like, not only are you not going to get your justice, it's going to get worse.
Right. I don't know if you guys talked about this while I had my little thing, but I'm gonna bring this up. Another moment that really stands out is back in season 2, a combination of the ending, I believe, of one episode and the beginning of another episode with Melisandre and then the whole Renly situation.
Oh yeah, Demon
Vagina.
Yeah,
where we have the shadow assassin of whatever. That we still don't really know what exactly happened there and how that all happened. I don't know if we ever will get clarity on that or whatever. But that was just another moment in the show, at least for me, where it was just like, you see, we saw nothing like that up until that point, and we've seen nothing like that since that point.
Yeah.
But it definitely opened up the world, to, at least for me, to say, okay, there is definitely a high level of magic that is, it opened the world. Maybe it's not magic because it's like godly powers or whatever, but it opens up that we haven't seen anything quite to that magnitude from any sort of magic up until that point of the show, and it really just kind of opens up the rest of the series to say there's a lot that can go on here. I feel like, and obviously that was a lot. And then from a personal level, I always thought that Renly was one of the better choices, and so that memory also stands out to me because of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned that, and when I was asking, and I think that's a great moment right there. You mentioned, I'm really glad you brought that up because I wanted to highlight that a little bit for a couple reasons. One, to piggyback off what you said there, I think it is there to remind us that this is a fantasy, and even though Game of Thrones, particularly the first season, it's up until the dragons and with the White Walkers at the beginning, it's almost a show that could be in medieval times, almost, because the magic is so on the fringes. But I think that moment in season 2 is to remind us that yes, this is a fantasy, people, and yes, you don't always have an explanation for how this stuff works because it's magic. It just happens.
Right.
And it's to remind us that is a player in the show just as well as all the human characters. The second reason I wanted to mention that was because when I was asking what our most memorable Game of Thrones moment was, I wanted to include not just within the context of the show, so many fantastic moments in the show, but one of my favorite Game of Thrones moments is actually my experience of watching Game of Thrones. And so for you listeners out there who don't know, I attended a Christian university, and I was an RA at the university, so my job is kind of uphold the rules. Well, Game of Thrones, and it was like one of those campuses where you're not allowed to have certain movies and TV shows based on content on there. So, kind of weird. But Game of Thrones kind of fell in that gray area, and I started watching it, and I had to be very protective about my watching habits with it because I didn't want someone to walk in and see exactly what was going down, because if someone walks in during the wrong scene of Game of Thrones, they get a very uncomfortable idea of what exactly it was I was watching, pornographic material types of things. So one of my favorite moments, though, is of course,
yes.
I am watching Game of Thrones in my dorm room over the summer, and it was over the summer, so luckily there wasn't a lot of students around. But there were people who were doing various things throughout the summer, and they were popping in on campus. And a couple of my friends who hadn't quite been exposed to that type of content before, of course, I'm watching Game of Thrones, and they come to my room as freaking Demon Vagina Baby is born, and I'm just like, they're like, Caleb, what the hell are we watching? And I'm just like,
That's actually really funny because I actually had the exact same moment with the exact same scene when I began watching it with my roommate, and I think you were actually a part of that too, Caleb. Matt, who has been a guy who's asked a couple questions on the show before. And we had that moment where we were sitting there watching it, and at first, like you, I was very protective. I would only watch it in my very close room and stuff like that. And then finally I started opening up in what would be more considered like a living room type of area, the way that our dorms worked. And I was like, I'm going to get a little bit more comfortable with it or whatever. And then, of course, my roommate, who knows nothing about Game of Thrones, decides to walk out while Melisandre is giving birth. And it was just, I remember thinking, like, what are you guys watching? Like,
It's like,
freak out and, like, walked back into his room and didn't really talk to us for a little bit. It was kind of weirded out. So it's kind of funny that
has to be the weirdest
of all the
thing
things.
in the show.
Yeah, definitely.
I can't think of anything that's like more bizarre than that.
Yeah, a woman giving birth to a smoke monster. Oh my gosh, it was really. And then, like at the same, and in that scene, the way it was played up was initially it was played up as Melisandre might be trying to seduce Davos, so it was like really weird. And then she's like, "Woo!" and she's pregnant, and you're like, "What the hell?" She wasn't pregnant like last episode, and then bam, smoke vagina monster thing.
I can't wait until she's not in the show anymore.
Oh god,
that may be forever, but. I think she brings some scenes down. It's not the actress or anything. I just don't like the character much.
The character is she's a character I am very glad as a part of the show personally, but man, she drives me insane. I hate her so much. I hate that character for so many reasons. Melisandre.
Because I think Stannis could be so much more interesting without her. I think that's mostly it.
Yes, but I will say that I think she is highlighting something that George R. Martin is trying to showcase.
Yeah.
And as we always talk about how
fanaticism,
kind of like parallel, religious fanaticism. And what's interesting about Melisandre is I don't think she is a religious fanatic. I think she is someone who is using religion as a tool to gain power. And but I think it shows like how those people, those very intelligent people who know how to put on a show for other people, can build a cult. Kind of the same way that the Scientology movement was kind of evolved, around this very charismatic leader. And despite there not being a lot of evidence to support his claims, there was
any religion, really.
Well, any religion. That's the most contemporary I can think of. But yes, any religion really, based around very charismatic people who they gain all this power based off of people who are not quite as intelligent and are looking for answers. So I think that's what, and we talked about this last season a lot. Daniel, if you want to chime in on this, we talked a lot about how the parallels between the type of faith Melisandre has versus guys like Thoros, who his faith seems a little more legitimate, as opposed to hers, which seems like almost showmanship. And again, she's using it as a tool as opposed to actually believing in it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that it's for her it's more about it's a means to an end.
Yeah.
As are pretty much every kind of ideal and moral code and anything in Game of Thrones is for almost all the characters is a means to an end. I think there are very few characters that truly believe in what they do, and the ones that do usually end up dead. So
and I will say this too. I really do truly think, and I'll let Daniel chime in here because I really want to see what he has to say about this. But I really do think Melisandre believes in the Lord of Light and all that. But I also think that she sees it as an opportunity too. So I really do think she believes in him, though. I really do. She just doesn't. She doesn't necessarily believe in all the religious mumbo jumbo, but she believes in the power that is demonstrated by that God, right?
Right. I think, I basically more agree with that. I think the more of the fanatic. Religious fanatic in that scenario is actually Stannis' wife.
Yes.
I think she's more of the religious fanatic kind of person in that scenario. But I think Melisandre definitely believes that the power is real, and I think that's why she uses it. She sees it as, okay, this works. How can I use this to my advantage? Whereas I think that is a little bit different where we saw Bondrick Dondarrion back in the Brotherhood, where he saw it as it works, and he doesn't. I don't feel like he uses it as a tool in the same way that she does.
Yeah.
I feel like for him, it's a little bit more of a. He was at his, his friend was on the deathbed, and he said, "Okay, let's see if this works." And it did, and he's decided to follow it since then.
Right. Well, he's seen evidence that it works, so he's like, well, I mean, I don't know exactly all the ins and outs of it, but I know it works, so I believe
Right,
it.
and I'm going to follow what I believe is that, whereas hers is a little more, it does work, let me use it for myself, where he had more of a selfless experience with it, whereas I guess that's selfish, I guess, to save your friend or whatever, but it was for someone else, not for
Well,
him.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's selfish. I
Directly.
mean, it's not really selfish per se, but yeah, I know what you mean.
But it's interesting. I was gonna say, as we're kind of going over these moments, I don't believe anyone said anything from this season, which is kind of funny. I guess we're trying to think more of our favorite moments of the past, I guess. But I
Right.
don't think we can have this conversation without discussing the White Walker baby moment. That's still seeing that still just kind of blows my mind, and I'm really excited to go back and watch those again. That episode particularly because you don't get a lot from that particular moment, but just when you see that, it has such an impact on the audience.
Right. You're not expecting to see it.
Yeah, it's at least such a visual image. I know I can picture perfectly just by seeing it the one time that I actually saw it, and it's just it left such a great image in my mind. I don't think we can have this conversations about great moments without talking about that one.
I mean, if we're gonna, well, that one didn't leave like a huge impact on me per se.
It doesn't have a huge
But
impact on the world, but
a big moment, mostly because I don't feel like I've truly realized the significance of it yet. I don't know where that's gonna go. For me, and I've said this when it happened, the very, very, very best scene of the entire series so far is the trial of Tyrion. And that speech at the end is just freaking glorious. So, I mean, that's my personal favorite. I can't get over like how those lines were delivered. It was just so good.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely one of the strongest moments of the entire show.
Yeah. The Tyrion scene is undoubtedly, again, I mean, we mentioned this a couple weeks ago. That is going to be a scene people will reference about the show. When this show is done over 10 years from now, people are going to. There are going to be a number of scenes, a lot of scenes, but I think among them is definitely going to be his speech at the end of the trial. I mean, I truly do. I think it was an incredible speech, really just highlighting how his characters struggle throughout the entire show so far, and how he's wrestled against his status as a dwarf and his own family, and how he said, it highlights so much about him. He feels like he has done so much and received no recognition for any of it, no benefit of the doubt because he's a dwarf. So I mean, yeah, great moment. And let's go. I'll reference another Lannister scene. I thought the scene with Jaime in the bathtub last season was really great, really great, especially given from a character that it
was a very big character moment.
Well, most of us didn't like, because he shoved Bran out the window in the first episode and killed his cousin in season 2, which I thought was kind of awesome. But it was just really crazy to see this really interesting, insightful transformation to say, hey, this guy is a real character. He's not just this two-dimensional, arrogant asshole.
Yeah, that season and that, I think even that moment is the moment for a lot of people that changes their opinion on Jaime.
Yeah.
Definitely. At least around that episode or that time is when people are starting to think, oh, maybe I don't hate Jaime. Maybe I actually kind of like him.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's more to. At least you can kind of like him because you go underneath all the layers of and you find out who Jaime Lannister really is to realize that there is a hint of selflessness there, that he does actually care a lot about other people and the well-being of his not only his family and his people.
It really speaks to the power of that season with Jaime when the majority of people now like Jaime, who one has an incestuous relationship with his sister, and two, shoves a child out a window.
Right.
The first episode.
Yeah, the very first episode. So the fact that there are scenes that can redeem a character like that means they're very, very good scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, very powerful. And I mean, there's a number of moments. I can rant off. I watched the Red Wedding when I saw the Red Wedding last season, and being a book reader. I know it had to have been crazy as a show watcher, and Austin can chime in on this at some point if he wants to. But as a book reader, I was watching with a lot of people who hadn't read the books and know it was coming. And it's a double-edged sword because they like knowing it was coming, the anticipation was terrible, but like they like twisted the knife before it even happened, because I was sitting there and like his wife was there, and the way they set the whole scene to feel nice and warm and friendly, and everyone was happy at the wedding. And then, man, that freaking line where his wife's like, "I'm gonna name my son Eddard," and then she's like, "Don't you want to teach little Ned how to ride a horse?" And like, but it was before anything went down. But I'm sitting there in my chair just squirming. I'm like, "Oh God, how can they do this? It's gonna be terrible." And the flip side of that is that I was in a room full of people who didn't know that was about to happen. So I'm like, not only am I freaking out, wigging out, I'm looking to see what their reaction is going to be to everything that's going on, because they're just so unsuspecting. And then just when it happened, it was like, holy crap.
It was. Unfortunately, I knew something was coming through through some spoilers from some friends. I didn't know what exactly. So the surprise factor wasn't quite there for me, but I think people kind of knew that it was building up. The viciousness and the brutality of it was totally unexpected. It was so brutal. And for me, of the characters that got the majority of the screen time, I always thought Caitlyn and Robb were some of the flatter characters.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I was not happy to see them go because they're the good guys, right? I felt like, okay, this is hopefully going to open up some new and interesting storylines, and it totally did. But yeah, it was just totally brutal and just vicious.
Yeah. Red Wedding is definitely another one of those moments that's going to go down as one of the most iconic from the whole show. I mean, hands down. I think when it's all done, even if you didn't like Robb and Ned, and honestly, I'll give you their storyline not exactly the most exciting, but it was, again, what they represented, and the fact that just got squashed in such a brutally dark way was just, crazy.
Yeah, if I have to pick like a handful of scenes that will be remembered forever from this series, it's the beheading of Ned, the Red Wedding, the death of Joffrey, and Tyrion's speech so far. And two of those are in this season, and I have a feeling there's going to be more from this season. This season is so good.
I think so too.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Daniel, you mentioned earlier there hadn't been a lot this season. I guess the reason I hadn't thought about scenes from this season is because I haven't fully digested it yet. That makes sense.
And when I said that, I mean, obviously there have been great moments from the season. I just thought it was interesting that we chose to pick from, like, for me, my first three were all from season 2, except for the Ned thing, which was at the end of season 1. It was just interesting how we went back. Just thought it was interesting. But I think part of that is true. We haven't finished this season yet, so we're still sort of accepting season. We haven't fully digested season 4.
Yeah,
we're still
the death of Joffrey. That whole sequence is incredible. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But it's not. I mean, even though that happened 6 weeks ago, it still hasn't registered. Like, the season's not done, so it still hasn't registered with me that that's a memory. If you know what I mean.
It's like a past moment of the show. Like, we're still in it a little bit.
Right. We're still seeing the fallout of it. Death of Joffrey was incredible. Hands down, no doubt about it. I mean, the way they executed it, the way they did that whole wedding sequence, and the way they set up the whole, it could be anybody at all. I mean, just seeing Austin's reaction.
We still don't even know all the people involved. It's true.
True. Yeah, we don't know. There's someone out there who's still trying to poison that Joffrey. So.
They have not revealed that Cersei was behind all of it. So, I'm waiting for it. Waiting.
Yeah. So I mean, just to see the reaction there and to see how people I was watching with reacted, and just the way the show executed it. And man, I gotta say, even though it was Joffrey dying, the image of that kid's face all purple and crap like that, it was still pretty gross. Like it's a pretty dark. Like, it's not an image I care to look at very often. You know what I mean? Even though I hated Joffrey. Well, guys. There's a lot of awesome things in Game of Thrones, but I think what makes Game of Thrones exciting, and something we don't get to do on this podcast a whole lot because we're usually focused on episode to episode, is talking about fan theories. Now, this gets a little tricky because me and Daniel, I have read all 5 books. I know Daniel has read about 3.5 of them, and Austin hasn't read any of them. So there is, like, different amounts of certain degrees of like knowledge all of us have on what's going on. But I think it's really safe to say if we can kind of focus on like these series-long theories. I think there's a lot of we've mentioned a few of them in the past on the show, but I'd really like to go in depth with some of our fan theories out there. I think the big one we mentioned a couple last episode, 2 episodes ago, something like that, was the theory on who Jon Snow's mother is.
Right.
And I think me and Daniel have talked a lot about it. Me and Austin have talked a little bit about it, but all three of us haven't really sat down and had a conversation about it.
Right.
So there are a few trains of thought. One of them is...
It was kind of, before we kind of talk about this, it's kind of cool how this theory came about. Me and Caleb were actually, it was the summer before Season 3 started. We were sitting in our dorm rooms or whatever, and it was kind of boring because it was summer and nobody's there on campus. And we're just sitting there talking about Game of Thrones. Caleb's in the process, I believe, of reading Book 5 at that point.
Yeah.
And I was still back in Book 2 or whatever. I was just talking, and I just thought, it's interesting how they always bring up, like, they make it such a point in the show to make the fact that, Jon Snow is a bastard, and the whole, like, especially during Season 1, they make a huge deal about who his mother is, and I wonder if there's something to that, and we sort of just started talking, and we sort of came up with the theory, and then it was interesting when we started kind of looking at things up online. There were a lot of other people that had the same similar theory, and so it was interesting how we kind of thought that up, and then realized, hey, other people kind of think of the same way we are, and so that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was very organic. Like me and Stoll hadn't looked at anything online. We did, and it was reading. I was reading. We were reading the books at different points, and honestly, it's just it's again when you're reading, it's not something I hadn't had a chance to stop and actually think about. Okay, what are these theories? It was kind of like we talked about with Littlefinger, like when we found he poisoned Jon Arryn. Like I hadn't had a chance to think. Well, I wonder who did that. Like I just been reading, and I thought a little bit about it, but I had never really theorized about it. So me and Stoll had sat down, and we were literally sitting down talking about theories. And yeah, like you said, it just kind of starts very natural. Like, I wonder, I remember we begged the question, what if Jon actually isn't a Stark? It's kind of where the thought process started. And we went crazy right there,
I'll tell you when I return, Jon. I'll tell you all about it.
Yeah.
Everybody who ever loved him.
Yeah, no. Ned, if you go back and watch Season 1, Ned Stark says that to a whole lot of people. We'll talk about it when I get back, or I'll talk about it next time I see you. I mean, of course,
God, George R. R. Martin's such a bastard.
But yeah, so me and Stoll
on that actually, since we don't know really who actually knows. Do you think who could conceivably tell us? Now, my theory is the only person out there who could really tell us at this point is Benjen Stark, who might be dead, may not be. We don't know what the hell happened to the guy. He just kind of disappeared.
I hadn't thought about him.
Yeah, because he's Ned's brother, and he could legitimately hold the key for Jon Snow, and he was going to tell him all these stories when he came back, and he didn't come back either. Yeah.
Sure,
but they didn't wrap that up, so they definitely left open the window for him to be able to come back, and I don't know if you guys know more than I do or not, or if it's just something.
I will say I don't know anything more than you do in that particular situation, but I think something is going on with that storyline. I don't think they would have made such a point about it if he wasn't going to be coming back, or we weren't going to find out what happened to him. I think there's going to be very particular about that whole situation.
Yeah, no, Benjen has been mentioned. Benjen has been mentioned in every book. Now he hasn't been in any of the books since book one. He's been mentioned. He's still in the collective consciousness of Game of Thrones. Like he's not been forgotten. But spoilers. I'm through book 5, and that's the storyline. That subplot has not yet tied up.
I feel like that's a key thing. There's something very important going on there, and I don't know what it is. And I can only assume it has to do with Jon Snow.
I feel like it's a really good point about who could tell us who would have knowledge of that. I think another one, and this is part of the theory crafting, would be Jojen Reed and Mira's father.
Yeah.
Because apparently on Alana's deathbed, basically, she says something to Ned that he promises to tell nobody. And Jojen and Ned has held true to that promise, as Ned does, and told nobody. but Jojen's father was present when the promise was made, and so he is aware of whatever that promise was.
Do we know that in the show? Do we even know Jojen's background in the show at all? Because that's all news to me.
No, we don't. So let's take a couple steps back here.
Now that is fact. I'm pretty sure that occurred.
Yes, that did occur. The show has not highlighted that. The books have. The show has not.
Because yeah, from my perspective, Jojen's like just this random dude that we decided to start trusting for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, no, fair game. The show hasn't necessarily, and I like those characters the way they're, especially this season, have been. But the show didn't really introduce them in the most organic ways. They actually would, if it had gone truly by the books. And again, I'm not saying one's better than the other because I don't want to do that. But the books introduced them. They actually show up at Winterfell in book 2. They're there for a whole book before they get into this whole like Dream Seer thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was really funny because in season 2, I went online and I watched season 2. You know, like it was already finished when I started watching it, but I got online. Everyone was asking where are these guys at, and I didn't know who they were, obviously. But anyway, so let's take a couple steps back though. To kind of track where mine and Stoll's theory is. Basically, our theory, which again I think is very popular among fans out there. If you go and look it up online, is that Jon Snow is not he's a Stark, but he is the product of Alana Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. Now let's have a little history lesson here. Now, if you remember, Robert's rebellion started because Robert was in love with Alana and she was kidnapped by Rhaegar Targaryen. Now, our theory starts with
Rhaegar, as a side note, married to Oberyn's sister.
Yes, Rhaegar is married to Oberyn's sister, and he is also the older sister of Daenerys Targaryen, or older brother of Daenerys Targaryen. So he's such a key player in how things have turned out, even though we've never seen him on the show because it was a long time ago. But we think that not only did he not kidnap Alana, we think they were in love. I think that she did not love Robert at all. I think he was mad. He was totally infatuated with her, and she wasn't into him. And he was, but he of course, and as you can even go see in season 1, the way he talks about her is very, very romanticized. Like it's almost like she's not a real person. She's more of an idea that he was in love with. And Cersei, and I remember there was a scene in season 1 where Cersei asks him, you know, did I ever have a chance? And he said, I love that woman so much that 7 kingdoms couldn't fill the void. Like, so I always put it as he was in love with the idea of her, but she never actually loved him. So I think they conceived a child, and what happens is Ned Stark goes out, he gathers a few of his own bannermen, one of them being Howland Reed, Jojen Reed's father, and they go to rescue her, while Rhaegar is away fighting with Robert in battle and loses. But they go to this, I can't remember, there's a castle they go to down in the south, and I can't remember where it's at. And all of his men, except for Howland Reed, die, and that's when the promise is exchanged. Lyanna makes Ned promise not to tell anybody something, and then we don't ever find out what that is. Now, I think that is Jon as a Targaryen for a number of reasons. One of them being that Robert would totally kill Jon Snow if he knew he was a Targaryen, just period, across the board. Not to mention, like, the implications that would have on the kingdom. That would actually make him the true heir of the throne, right? Yes. If that were true. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of dynamics, and I think it matches with everything that the show has told and the book has told us so far, because the books especially always comment about how much Jon Snow looks like a Stark. Like, how much he looks like a Stark, more so than Robb and all his other brothers. He looks like a Stark, because his other brothers look more like Tullys, but not Jon Snow. So I think it fits. I think it all fits, and it would actually explain. It would actually explain, I think, a lot of the history that's still kind of on the hinges, and we don't know what's going on. And it would tie into the greater thread and narrative of the show, is of what happens when people do find out he's a Targaryen, and how is that going to impact Daenerys? How is that going to impact the kingdom, the 7 kingdoms?
And I also think that story fits more within several characters, sort of fits in line with what they would actually do. For example, Ned. I feel like it is much more likely that Ned would, quote unquote, lie to protect someone than to actually go against his vow to his wife and cheat on him with another woman and then have a bastard. I don't feel like that fits Ned as much as to protect this child, I'm going to say that I did something to them, and kind of put that on himself.
It'll be fine though, because the Targaryens are gonna keep the bloodline pure. Jon Snow and Daenerys are gonna get married, and they'll live happily ever after.
And they won't even know it, though.
It's gonna be good. That's how you keep the blonde hair.
There you go. Except
Okay.
Jon Snow looks like a Stark.
Well, but he's got the recessive.
That has been one of the counter arguments that I have heard. One of the counter arguments that I've heard to this is that all Targaryens have blonde hair, and Jon has no element of that. Now, my counter argument to that counter argument is that they've always married themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've never seen them outside of their own family.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great point because they were so incestuous. We haven't seen them marry non-blonde people. And guess what, guys? I'm pretty sure dark heads in the way that whole genetics works, dark beats lighter hair. So.
It's true, but I should note that the Game of Thrones universe is a little weird. For example, Tywin mentions that he's the bank mentions that he's like 67 years old. How do they map years? Normal years are mapped through seasons, but apparently they've had like a summer for forever. So how do they map ages? Anyway, my only point there is the logic that we use may not fit. I don't know.
Oh, fair enough. I had never thought about how the calendar works there. They haven't really talked about that a whole lot. But they also do talk about, I think the year has to be comparable to ours because they talk about how one summer lasted like 10 years. So obviously they've got some sort of calendar laid out, right?
But it's never really explained very well, I don't think. But as far as the Jon Snow being a Targaryen thing, I do think, I'll put it this way, I think that's probably where the storyline was heading. But I think as soon as George R. R. Martin realizes someone has either figured it out or something, he'll just change it. He'll be like, no, that's no longer interesting. If you guys know where I was going, I'm changing it now. So it's not going to be the case anymore. So we can throw the whole theory out the window. In fact, if you have good theories, you probably should never ever mention them because it will never come true.
Okay, so funny point you mentioned that, Austin. George R. R. Martin has actually been interviewed, and that's actually one of the reasons he says that he does not read fan theories because he's like, listen, guys, I've straight up seen him on YouTube, and if I can find it, I'll drop it in here. Mm-hmm. He has straight up said, if you tell me you know what's going on, he said, used to be, before the internet, one guy would know, and I'm like, oh, good on you for knowing that. I'm really glad you feel that. He said, now on the internet, though, that person gets on one forum, and then all of a sudden you've got a legion of idiots who know exactly what the answer is. So he's like, then I'm tempted to change it because I want to subvert people's expectations and be surprising.
But it's not always a better story as a result.
Exactly, and that's why he says he does not read fan theories. Based specifically on, he didn't mention. I don't think that was in reference to the Jon Snow theory. It was just in reference to theories in general.
So,
but I think.
So you heard it here first, folks. This podcast is ruining Game of Thrones.
Make sure George R. R. Martin does not hear our podcast because he will rewrite the whole frickin' series like that. So yeah, I think that's interesting to see. Jon Snow ends up being Targaryen. He's the rightful heir to the throne, which ties into my prediction way back last season when we started this podcast, and I said I want Jon Snow to sit on the throne. Bam! I want him to sit on the throne because he's the rightful heir. But I will also say, even though this answer about his lineage has not been answered, there are developments in the 4th and 5th books that do kind of jack with things a little bit, as far as Jon Snow and Targaryens and things of that nature. So all I'm meaning to say is there's other stuff we're not talking about because we can't talk about it yet that could totally throw everything we're talking about right now out of whack. So there's that.
Just ruined it, Caleb.
I didn't ruin anything. Just
ruined everything.
Ruined the book. Well, but I think this is a good segue because we're talking. This is again we talked last week, 2 weeks ago. This is a Song of Ice and Fire. Bran is a big question mark in how this all turns out. And while I know a little more than what you guys do, the books really don't progress a whole lot more past book 3. There's like one really big thing that happens, but other than that, Bran's still a pretty big question mark. Where do you guys think he falls into all of this?
I think I've mentioned this before in past podcasts. I think Bran is definitely going to be the other side of Melisandre in a way. Maybe not particularly that role or whatever, but I think Melisandre has made reference to this other god that's not the Lord of Light, and I think Bran's going to be somehow tied up with that, where whatever this three-eyed crow thing is, or uh, I don't know. I just think that his is the opposite of Melisandre, wherever he's headed. And maybe I could be way off on that. Maybe they end up on the same sort of side, or whatever. But I don't know. I just think that he is going to be very important. His role is going to be extremely important at some point, and I think it'll have something to do with White Walkers / other god. But I don't. I could be. I don't. I'm not. I have no evidence to prove any of that. That's just sort of where I think it's headed.
I said way back when I was a guest on this podcast that I thought Bran would end up being king. I said that because I was still riding the Stark train, but will he be king? I don't know. I think he'd be an interesting king, but I do think he has a big role to play long term. And I don't know what the White Walkers mean. I don't know what's going on with the other. My question to you guys, actually, as I'm trying to formulate a theory on this, is when Melisandre talks about the other, and the various characters do, is that related to the old gods, or is that something else entirely?
My understanding is that it's something else entirely, and my understanding is she even believes that it holds some sort of power.
Whereas she totally
my understanding of it is that this is the it to the Lord of Light in the sense of we talked a couple episodes ago where she set up the parallels where the Lord of the Light is these three adjectives. I don't remember what they were off the top of my head. And then the Lord of Darkness, Lord of whatever, the other three adjectives. And she gives it some sort of, like, it does have the power or ability to do some things, but my Lord's greater. That's how that's my understanding of it. I don't have that's about all I got.
Yeah, I guess the reason I feel like it's related, and a lot of it has to do with some of the visions, right? So
Yeah.
I do think the visions are related to the White Walkers, and there's strong imagery always in the visions of the weirwood trees, which are always related to the old gods. I do think somehow the White Walkers are either the embodiment of the old gods, or I feel like the White Walkers are there to provide balance.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I feel like they're there to provide balance, and I don't know. I don't think they're that evil force that they have been portrayed as, because I don't think things are ever really that simple in this universe.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that statement.
Yeah. I think there's something about them that is not just mindless killing machines, and we saw that a little bit with the whole baby scene. That they're an organized society of some kind, and they have a purpose and a logic to what they're doing, and I don't believe that that's purely just evil. So, as far as Bran goes, I think he very well could meet up with them, and potentially either, like you said, join their cause or use them in some way. But I think the theory of him being like you said, a prophet, kind of, like, maybe not a prophet, maybe that's not the right word, but you know what I mean, like a intermediary for them, in the same way that Melisandre is a really kind of interesting dynamic.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point because about the old gods and things like that, because as I'm thinking about this, I'm trying to think, okay, what do we really know about the White Walkers? And we don't know a lot, but we know that according to OSHA, that they have been a part of the world before, apparently around 1,000 years ago, I don't know if you guys remember her little thing. I think it was in season 2, which she
I
talks
do.
about it. She says that they were awake 1,000 years, and then they went to sleep. And then they've been apparently asleep for 1,000 years, and now they've woken up.
When the
and
dragons
there's
come back.
right. And so it's interesting that so it'd be interesting. They've been around before, but now the dragons were around longer than the White Walkers were. The dragons have only been gone for what, like 200 years ish, where the White Walkers have been gone apparently for 1,000. But I don't know. It's interesting to bring up the old gods, knowing that what we know about the Walkers, if they've been there a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting.
I've always kind of felt that that the dragons and the White Walkers are kind of old enemies, and humans are just kind of stuck in the middle a little bit. That those two sides, like the White Walkers exist to kill the dragons, and the dragons exist to kill the White Walkers. So I hope
Song of Ice
that
and
this,
Fire.
yeah, and I hope that is all rewarded with an epic battle scene.
Right.
We will see.
It's coming. It's coming.
But as far as Bran goes, I mean, we've seen a lot of his visions and things, and we're not really sure where his storyline's going yet. You guys had mentioned that you thought he was still heading north, and that he was still kind of heading to this voice. I had assumed, I guess, based on the latest vision, and we kind of see dragons flying over King's Landing and kind of all this stuff, and on a werewood tree and things like that. I assumed he needed to go back to King's Landing. We saw that. We saw those images. We saw the dungeons. We saw images of Ned. Everything kind of in that scene, in those visions, all pointed to King's Landing, and so I thought that's where he should go. But what would he do when he got there? I have no idea. He kind of stick out like a sore thumb, especially with Hodor.
And he's the heir of Winterfell, so he's kind of important. Too important to go back there. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
He would be again another pawn in the game of Thrones. So yeah, I'm not going to comment a whole lot, but I don't think the observation about the weirwood trees and the old gods being tied together somehow related to the White Walkers is a bad observation by any means.
Yeah, I think it's a very strong point. I don't know. Kev probably knows a lot more than knows at least a little bit more than I do on that. I think that's a very good point. I've never considered that.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see the old gods and the new gods and how all that stuff ties out, and how the World of Light's kind of this new religion. And then there's the new gods, it's kind of like the accepted religion of the South, and then there's the old gods. And how those three are going to interact, we'll see. I don't know. It's complicated. Sorry. So now that we're kind of hot. I mean, we are kind of alluding to an epic battle, right? So when this show is all said and done, season 7, season 8, however long the producers want to run it, although they've recently been on record saying 7 seasons.
I don't know how they're going to do that, by the way.
I don't know either. Well, I honestly think, and I've actually been in some very intense discussions about this, I really do think that there's going to be a lot of condensing and rearranging storylines. And honestly, having read book 4 and 5, not saying that there's a lot of filler, because there's not. There's certainly storylines that could be accelerated, and it wouldn't really take away from what's going on at all.
Right.
And they've already actually implemented some of them into the show so far. And heck, the scene with Reek, Theon, Greyjoy with the Moat Caitlyn, that's not until book 4. So they're adapting the series. They're not adapting book by book. They're adapting the series as a whole. And I do think that we're going to see a lot of streamlining of storyline. I mean, heck, Brienne and Podrick, that's another storyline that is not in book 3. So I think we're going to see a lot of streamlining of subplots. We're going to see a lot that get cut down, a lot that get moved around. 7 seasons still seems pretty quick to me, but those guys also know. They've also had extensive 2-week meetings with George R. R. Martin where they've worked out the fine details of what's going to happen. So I think they know what they're doing.
I've done a good job so far. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't want to knock book 4 and 5 as being less action-packed as book 3 or anything. They're very, very good. But there's a lot of meandering in both of those books that happens that, while certainly not pointless, I think could be adapted for TV in a way that would be a lot quicker. So, just my take. But anyway, so yeah, 7 seasons. Who do you think is going to live or die at the end of this thing?
That's a loaded question.
Well,
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well,
Daniel.
I was just starting to think out loud because I feel like that's all I can really do to answer this question because I really don't know. Feel like Bran's going to be there in the end. I feel like Jon's going to be there in the end. I feel like Daenerys is going to be there in the end. I feel like the Reeds will probably die.
Yeah. They're dead meat.
I feel like Stannis will actually die.
Oh, please, God. We can only hope.
I think Melisandre might be there until the end. She might die at the end. I feel like a lot of the people at the wall are going to die.
Yeah.
Except for Jon.
I think that might happen this season. Those giants are coming.
Lannister-wise, Cersei's going to die.
Oh, yes.
It'll probably be closer to the end, but she's going to die. I do feel like at some point Tywin has to die. I don't feel like he can be there till the end. I feel like he has to. I don't know. I just feel like, and I've been saying that since the beginning of season 3.
He has.
I am maybe that's just me. Then let's see. I want to say that Tyrion's going to be there at the end, but I honestly have no idea.
I think Tyrion's going to die late in the game. He is too juicy of a tool.
Hey, he could die.
For like a storytelling tool, you could kill him off, and it would just make such a huge impact on the audience and on the story.
He might not even make it to season 5. Man.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It's yet to be determined. He's definitely not exactly in the safest place right now.
I don't think he's done yet. I think I could be totally wrong. I think there is a much more of a story for him to tell, and I don't think you kill him at his low point. He's not the type of character that you do that with. But who knows?
Yeah.
I could have all these theories that could have all thrown out the window. So.
I've got two things to say to that.
Hold on. I do think Arya will be there in the end too. It's actually kind of interesting. I'm picking a lot of people to live somehow.
Well, but you've also not mentioned a lot of characters. Jaime hasn't been mentioned yet. Does that mean he doesn't make it?
I think Jaime dies.
Yeah, I feel like Jaime probably dies.
Yeah, I think he does too. I don't know when, but he's gonna die.
I am not saying that I want any of these deaths to occur. I'm just saying that this is what I think things will play out. And here's the thing, and we'll get into this.
Soon.
Who?
The Onion Knight, Davos.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I think he stands up to Melisandre one last time, and then he's done.
Probably. He's probably in the most dangerous position of most characters right now.
What's interesting about as we're naming all these characters, as we're going to talk about, I think here in a little bit, is we haven't even met some characters in the world. They're going to be new characters that we are still coming.
That's how Game of Thrones works. For every character you kill off, there's like 5 more to take their place.
I think Jorah dies very soon.
Yeah, I can see that.
I just think his story is about done, I feel. Especially with the way Daenerys' story is going, it's going to go through a low point. If you want to keep that exciting, you kill off Jorah.
Damn you, Jorah. No, okay, Austin, in retort to your Tyrion making it, I got 2 things to say to that. One being, I've got to say, more so than when I was reading the books, this show has made it seem like his character's come full circle. Like, from season 1. With the trial and his speech and, like, how it's all playing out. So, I'm not saying he's going to live or die. All I'm saying is, in a way, when this season's done, dead or not, like, his character has, like, come full circle. Like, I feel like the arc of his dwarfhood, his battle to try to defend with his family but also hate his family and all those things are going to be done.
I agree with you, but I think the potential for a new, even more interesting story to be told about his life away from the Lannisters could be even better.
Well, fair point. I mean,
Yeah,
that is a good point.
I see both your sides. I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting how like Caleb was pointing out, like, you know, we've seen him before. He was a dwarf fighting for his life through combat by trial, and now it's kind of hit that point again. And like you said, it's kind of hit a circle. Like,
right, and we've seen him go through all his struggles, and we've seen him that come to terms with his dwarfhood.
And like he came. Well, it's interesting because he came to terms with it, and he's been at terms with it probably since the beginning of the season. Honestly, back when he's talking to John, I believe he says, "Don't let," where he's like talking about using it. He's sort of, but then he hits this point where we saw last episode with Oberyn, where he just sort of breaks down and realizes, and he realized it, but it was just hard hearing it. Where Oberyn talks about how seriously he treated him when he was just a baby. Just hit that moment of like just fully like I am a dwarf, and in the trial scene he's saying I'm on trial for being a dwarf, and he's sort of come to that point, like even though he's fought it all his life, it's still in the end this is where he's at. Like,
well, yeah, and not to mention the fact that I feel like his battle with his own family has kind of come to circle with that. Like he's basically told Tywin to F off. He's going to go out on his own terms. So, that's all I'm saying. And I'm not saying he's dead or not. I just think it's the way his arc is turning out. It does seem like a natural conclusion.
I don't like the words you're saying, Caleb, and so I reject them.
Because it does not please him.
They make me unhappy. They do not please me. It does not delight me.
It's not delight.
There.
So characters I think aren't going to make it. I think Stoll's right. I think Stannis makes it really far, and then he dies. I think Melisandre makes it to the end. I think Littlefinger makes it to the end. I think Varys makes it to the end.
Ooh, okay. Those are interesting statements. I'm not so certain.
Now, whether they live through the end is a totally different scenario, but I think your characters like Littlefinger and Varys are going to be massive players in the end game of the show. Huge. I don't know how. The way that their arcs have turned out and the way that we know so little about them, I think really hints that they're having bigger roles to play in the.
I can't see how Littlefinger's future could be that bright. I see him dying in a season.
Maybe.
Oh. Wow.
Or at least losing everything.
Maybe I am crazy, but this is something I talked with Caleb over text about over the past couple weeks. I'm about to make the statement that people should not hate Littlefinger like he does, and I'm sort of don't have the evidence to back this up completely, and I'm not entirely believing in it, so maybe it's going to be like a half-hearted argument. But I was just sort of thinking about this the other day, and feel free to tell me how wrong I am. But I was just thinking about this the other day. So, Littlefinger, how many people, and I know that there's more to it than this, but in the whole grand scheme of things, how many deaths has he been a part of? Okay, first one that comes to mind is Ned's. But here's my thing, and I don't blame Littlefinger for Ned's death because he warned him several times. I don't believe that Littlefinger completely believed that Joffrey was going to kill Ned. I believe he thought he would just send him to the wall and get rid of Ned. So I would say he's indirectly a part of that. And then, but then he goes and he takes part in Joffrey's death, which we're happy about. Then he takes part in Lysa, and he is the reason Lysa Arryn dies, which we're
all pretty happy about. Let's be honest.
Delights us.
I count 6. By the way.
Okay. Well. What? I'm gonna go back and address 2 of them.
Here.
Those are the 3 main ones that I think of. Now I go back and say, okay, Robb and Catelyn. How much did he know about those, and how much was he a part of them? Are the other 2 deaths that stick out to me because those were around time? Did he know about it? Probably, but did he have any say in how it occurred or how it played out? I would say no, but we don't really know. While he definitely is not a good person, and he definitely is a schemer and a mastermind, to me, he has not done as many things for me to hate him. He's actually taken out more people that I was glad about than that I was not glad about. And in the one case of Ned, I don't even blame him for that. I don't think he had. But yeah, he backed involvement in his death. I don't feel like it was a direct involvement.
No, and I'll say this. I mean, if we've talked about this earlier this season, so we don't have to go super in depth. But Ned Stark is responsible for Ned Stark's death for not playing the Game of Thrones. And no, it does not make him responsible for the death of his own life. But Littlefinger, go back and watch it. He is totally pulling his strings. There's no doubt about that. But he does tell him more than one occasion, don't trust me. And then I remember distinctly Ned asking him for his advice on what he should do. And Littlefinger tells him, and he doesn't like it, so he's like, well, clearly you didn't come to me for advice, so here's what's going to happen. So, and then he tells Ned, you know what you're doing is kind of shady, right? So I'm just saying, like, yeah, he has a hand in it, so you could say he's responsible, but I ultimately don't think. If anybody's hands are dirty for Ned Stark's death, it's Joffrey and Cersei. Littlefinger, by association and by not stopping it from happening, sure, but I don't necessarily make that makes way responsible.
Oh, and sorry, and I forgot about John Aaron as well. And for John Aaron, I don't feel like there was enough emotional investment for any of us to really care.
I think Littlefinger is the single most evil character in the show. I believe that. He killed John Aaron. He was responsible for Ned Stark's death through a series of events. He killed his assistant. He killed Joffrey, which is fabulous. He killed Lysa Arryn, and he probably killed John Aaron's nephew as well, though that one, I don't really know. I don't think he was really involved. I don't see why he would be involved in the Red Wedding. He knew about it, but I don't see why he would be involved in it.
But he couldn't have really stopped it either, so there was,
Yeah, I think that was in motion, and he couldn't do much about it.
Right.
More, and I the thing is with Littlefinger is I don't think Littlefinger actually has a big master plan. I think he kind of rolls with things. I think he purposely, we talked about this before, he causes chaos and rolls with it to see what he can pick up out of the rubble, And I think that's his game. That's what he does. But I really believe he is probably the most purely evil character in the show. Aside from Joffrey, who's just freaking crazy.
I do think he is one of the best at sort of adapting to what his situation is.
I would argue that
so
he may not have a quote-unquote master plan. He does not have every single step of the game prepared. I think he's got one better. I think he has a tentative plan for what he's going to do, and he will. And he's an opportunist, so he'll take advantage of situations. He's adaptable,
which is more important.
Yes, especially in this world. That's what's going to help him climb the ladder, right? So I think it goes a little bit of both. He has goals, he has plans, and I think he even knows to some degree. I don't think he was surprised that he ended up going to the Eyrie to marry Lysa at all. Obviously, he wouldn't have kept her so close for so long. But knowing that he would at one point use her for something. But at the same time, there is quite a bit of making up as he goes along too. So I think that makes him both dangerous because he's a planner and he's also one to roll with the punches. So I think that makes him more dangerous. And two, Stoll, I do tend to agree with you. But I'm also, I also have said on the show, I do agree with Austin to some extent that he is probably the worst kind of evil in Game of Thrones. I don't think he's a pure evil character though. No character in Game of Thrones is. But
I think
as I've said,
that we have still alive, except for maybe Walder Frey, who's just an asshole.
Well, they're crazy. Well, and Ramsay.
I would say. Yeah, I was gonna say Ramsay Snow or whatever. So
that's like those guys are like a pure representation of human depravity in their most.
They are chaotic evil.
Yes, chaotic evil. Well, versus Littlefinger, who's a very lawful evil character. Oh well, actually, I'm gonna cut that because it's probably not accurate. But he's. We're not going to talk a lot. We've talked a lot about Littlefinger this season, and I think as much as I love talking about it, we probably need to cut back a little bit. But I will say this: I love him. I don't think he's purely evil, and I don't think his motivations are quite as unsympathetic as a lot of people think they are. I think they're very
Yeah.
reasonable, actually.
And that's sort of
Again,
the point I was trying to, I guess, make.
yes.
It's not interest. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
That's
no.
sort of
Well,
where I was going with that.
I see both reasons for him doing what he does. One being his love for Catelyn Stark, and his other, trying to prove, being humiliated when he was a young child. He's trying to prove to the world that he's better than them in his own way. Neither of those things, which I think, given a different light, could be viewed as a very positive thing on both ends. It's just how things have turned out and how the show presents those things that make him so evil. But he also is the man in the shadows, pulling the strings in a very devil, satanic-like way. Even though not directly responsible for a whole lot of evil, he is kind of the guy whispering in everyone's ear, which is pretty dang evil. So I'm kind of in the middle of you two, and I love that character. He's probably one of my favorite characters in the whole series, obviously, just because of how interesting I find that dynamic. But
I just completely respect him on a mental level.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily. So.
Well, and
Yeah.
my point is, I think, and again, because of his adaptability, Austin, to bring this way back to what we were talking about before we got too into it, is I think because of that, he's going to make it all the way to the end. Now, I don't think he survives the end, but I think he's there at the end of the series, and then he dies or something. I feel like he's always a step ahead of everyone, and he adapts very, very well
Right.
to whatever situation is given. And even though I think in a world where there's not magic, I think in a world where there's no dragons or White Walkers or anything like that, Littlefinger wins. But this isn't that world. He lives in. I think the big wrench in his plan is dragons, Daenerys, White Walkers, all that stuff that he can't control. So I think he's at the end. I think Varys is at the end. We don't know a lot about what his plans are, but I think he is also a schemer in his own right. And I think at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, we find out at least to some degree, what he's up to. I think that's going to kind of prove to be a series-long thing with him, because he's been I truly do believe he's been holding on to that power for some reason for so long. Not only just to stay alive, I think he's got ulterior motives. And then I think Jon Snow's there. I think Daenerys is there. And I think they're all there. Everyone else is kind of a question mark. I think Jaime dies towards the end, not at the end. I think Brienne's going to make it. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. I just think she's going to make it, because that dang sword with the dragon's glass sword, I think she makes it. Because the dragon's glass kills White Walkers. And I'm leaning to say that Yara Greyjoy makes it at least pretty close to the end, although I don't know how far that's going to last. But I do think a lot of those players in King's Landing that are squabbling right now, I don't think they're going to make it. I think Tywin's going to fall at some point. I think Cersei at some point is going to fall. I think Marjorie Tyrell is going to fall at some. All the people who are.
I didn't even think about the Tyrells.
All these people who are squabbling over the politics of Westeros aren't seeing the bigger picture, and I think the people who don't see the bigger picture don't make it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
So, there are a lot of characters out there to come into play, and on that note, there are a lot of characters that have yet to come into play, and I think there's a lot of we had an interesting announcement break out this week that certain characters are going to be in the season next season. Now, we don't know who's playing them, but there were several characters and their descriptions that were listed online by the winteriscoming.net. You can check out the press release online. But these are rumored, quote unquote, but I think they're actually pretty legit. So I'm going to go ahead and read through these names, and then you guys can chime in and let me know what you think. So first off, Prince Doran Martell. That was Oberyn's brother, who was supposed to show up.
Supposed to be there, right?
He's going to be there. Prince Trystane Martell, who is listed as the handsome fiance of Princess Myrcella, who is Cersei's daughter, who's been mentioned this season. There's Ario Hota, who is apparently Doran's personal bodyguard. Then we have the Sand Snakes. Those are the bastards of Oberyn Martell. And we have 3 listed here. There is Oberyn Sand, who's the oldest, Nymeria Sand, who is a quote-unquote mixed race. Hey, look, Oberyn doesn't care about race. He likes all things. And then there's Tyne, I can't say her name, Sand, who is the youngest and apparently is the most seductive of the bunch. So there's the Sand
Learned
Snakes.
from her daddy.
Oh, she learned from her daddy very well. All the tricks in the book. So, what do you guys think about that? The Martells having a bigger role next season.
I just hope I get to see how Oberyn interacts with all of them, and he's not dead next episode.
That would be very nice. That would please me.
That's what I want. That would delight me.
Yes. That'd be very delightful.
And there's been notes that, as far as casting goes, that they'll stick with the Latino kind of theme, which I think would be fantastic. I would love that. I think that's worked out really, really well for them in the past, and I think there's a lot of really, really talented Latino actors and stuff that don't really ever get much recognition here.
Yeah. I do think that their choice for Oberyn was fantastic. I think the guy has done a phenomenal job playing Oberyn.
It's like Pedro Pascal or something like that. I can't remember say his name right.
I think someone wanted to do Jimmy Smith for Doran Martell.
And Jimmy Smith, for those of you who don't,
big, but
yeah, probably I think is a hair too big. I don't know. That would be cool. I love Jimmy Smith. For those of you who don't know who Jimmy Smith is, he played Bail Organa in the Star Wars prequels, and he played whoever Dexter's best friend was, the the defense attorney in Dexter season 3. Those are kind of the two roles he's been most known for. He's played in a number of other things though. He's a very famous Hispanic actor.
Yeah, I think he'd be pretty cool, but yeah, maybe a little too high profile, a little too expensive for a show with...
I mean, I think Salma Hayek would make a great Oberyn Sand because she's older and she's Hispanic, so, right?
That's true. I don't think we're going to get Salma Hayek. It would be amazing, though. It would be so good.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
But yeah, if we get to go to Dorne... That's awesome. I can't wait to see it. That's a whole place we haven't even visited yet, and it seems to have a very rich, like super unique culture that we've only kind of hinted at through Oberyn. So I'm really, really excited to see where this goes and how we get to I hope this all takes place actually in Dorne and not in King's Landing, and it seems like that's probably the case given the sheer number of Martells that they're going to be casting. So
Martells, the entire family migrates to King's Landing.
Yeah.
Next season is going to be Game of Thrones season 5 that was subtitled the Martell Family Vacation.
Well, it makes sense. When Oberyn kills all the Lannisters and takes over King's Landing, then they're all going to want to move in, right?
It's a good point. They're going to need someone to take that power.
That's right. So Doran just takes over as king, and the War of the 5 Kings turns into the War of 6 Kings, and it's over.
Yeah, Doran's probably stayed pretty quiet for the War of the 5 Kings.
Mm-hmm. Apparently that's what they did too during the last wars too. They just kind of stay out of it as much as they can.
They're freaking Switzerland, man. They just sit there. They're like, cool, we love all you guys. We like having sex. Let us know when the war's
new
over.
Soldiers constantly.
Yeah. Stoll, any thoughts on the Sands and the Martells climbing into play next season?
Oh yeah, I'm super excited about it. I think that I've always been very interested in their culture, like Austin was alluding to. I think that there's a lot to explore, a lot that are different than what we're used to in the world of Westeros that goes on down there, and Marcella's down there, so that would be cool. And yeah, I think that'd be really awesome to have sort of the centerpiece be somewhere else that's not Westeros. If it was Dorne, that'd be really awesome. I think there's a lot of cool things that could happen down there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and I should probably say I'm with Austin. I'm really excited to see that culture, which has been proven to be very different than what we've seen before and very unique and rich. There's a whole history there that we haven't been able to access. I think it'll be really cool to see how that comes into play. Why did they stay out of the War of the 5 Kings? Why did they stay out of Robert's Rebellion? Interesting questions. That's all I'm saying. So if we can get kind of the inside of those characters, would be really great. And I also think the fact that Marcella is down there might hint that finally that character and that tie to the Lannisters is going to come back into play also. So, yeah, moving on to the other characters, I'll go ahead and read some off. High Sparrow. He's the pious head of a religious movement. Septa Unella, which is also religious, is the show is looking for a actress to play an imposing and unrelenting Septa who spends a lot of time with a major series character next year. So a Sept spending a lot of time with someone. I wonder who. Then there's Maggie the Frog, a fortune teller. Lola Stokeworth, which, if you guys remember correctly, last episode, is the woman that Bronn is supposed to marry. So guess what? Bronn might not be totally out of this yet.
God.
I thought he was out, man. I seriously thought we're going to see Bronn. He was going to be out.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Exactly. See, I seriously thought like we were going to say goodbye to Bronn. I was like, well, he could show up, but I feel like it's going to be more likely he just doesn't ever come back ever again. Like, I don't know, or something like that. But yeah, well, Bronn's wife-to-be is going to be in the play next season. Yezin, who is a sleazy Marinese slave owner. The Waif, a strange child from the books that Arya encounters, who will probably be played by an older actress. They're looking for someone of East Asian descent for the part. So that's interesting. So yeah, some interesting casting options. The one group I am a little surprised to see didn't make the cut at all is the Greyjoys, because I feel like that is a series of characters they are really building back up to make a return, especially this season so far, and knowing in the books where that goes. I'm very surprised we haven't heard more about them in this casting announcement. However, this is not a set-in-stone final casting list. So there's still a lot more info to come out. This isn't
even an official one, I don't believe. So
no, it's not official at all. I
don't have much to say on most of these because I just have no context for most of them. I think the religious figures may show up over in Essos, though, with Daenerys, because I think we'll start to get into the culture of Marine and stuff a little bit more that we haven't really gotten into very in depth yet, and I think this next season is really, really going to be a lot of that.
Yeah, I think we will see more Essos next season. I'll say that much. Mr. Stoll, any other thoughts?
No, I just think it's really exciting to see all the, like you said, the Dornish people, and I'm really excited to get more into that.
Awesome. So, based on these casting announcements, I think we can safely say that we're going to start to see a lot more of the world of Game of Thrones outside of even just Westeros. We are going to go to Essos. Probably going to go to Essos. We're going to see Dorne. We're going to see a lot of places that are new next season. If we could venture to guess, and I'm very excited about that because as much as I love King's Landing and seeing stuff there and experiencing the North, it is always cool to get some new locales.
Right.
So. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Sorry for hanging out here, guys, to give some theories on this week off as we kind of take a little break from Game of Thrones this week. I want to remind our listeners and viewers that you can find us on Facebook.com/CastBeyondTheWall, where you can like us and submit comments, share a post, all that 9 yards. You can follow us on Twitter @cast_beyond_GOT. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. We've actually got a small little audience on YouTube who watches our either our live broadcast or my fully edited episodes later in the week. And most importantly of all of those things, please, please, please subscribe to us on iTunes and give us a rating. That'll probably be one of the best ways you can help the Cast Beyond the Wall build an audience and be part of the conversation. And I do want to remind everyone that we are presented by our partners at WeGotThisCovered.com. They are a fantastic source for gaming, TV, movie news. And as I said at the top of the hour, Watch Dogs just came out today, the day of recording, and it's a pretty big game, guys. Kind of huge. And I imagine a lot of people who watch Game of Thrones are probably have at least heard of Watch Dogs or are curious in playing it. Go check it out at WeGotThisCovered.com. I think they've got it covered, guys. All right. Well, I think that about wraps the show. I don't think we had any viewers this show. So let me check on YouTube just to make sure, but I didn't see the numbers change at all. Or I guess I should just do.
Nah, it doesn't look like it.
Nothing? Okay. I didn't think so. All right, well, thank you so much for everyone tuning in this week as we enjoy kind of sit back and theorize. Hopefully you can kind of understand where we're all coming from and with our Game of Thrones philosophies these days. Next week's episode is The Mountain and the Viper, and we are going to see one really freaking epic battle, and I just absolutely can't wait. I hope all our listeners will tune in to hear our podcast next week where we talk about this fight that is going to be absolutely game-changing. All right, guys, any other comments this week?
Nothing from me. Thanks.
That's cool. All right,
awesome.
everybody. All right. Hey, everyone, enjoy this week off, and we will join you next time when we return to talk Mountains and Vipers, Ramses and Reeks. Until next time. That'll be it, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
And, yeah.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah.
Talk to you later.
All right,
Later, dude.